Well, hello once again to everyone. Greetings, first of all, to any members of our Pilgrim Church family who have tuned in for today's study. But greetings just as well if there might happen to be visitors tuning in for this. Welcome, one and all. This is Danny. I am here on behalf of all of the elders at the Church of Christ in Pilgrim with our weekly opportunity for reflection and discernment, or in acronym form, the W.O.R.D. This particular study is scheduled to be posted on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Today marks lesson number 7 as we continue our newest series of devotional videos. This current study is based upon a book I recently purchased from Amazon. It is entitled Tell Me the Stories of Jesus. It was written by Albert Mohler Jr. and carries a quite recent copyright of 2022. Here is an excerpt from the author's introduction to his work. God's own Son, God in human flesh, is who shared the parables with us. Jesus' parables reveal nothing less than the kingdom of heaven and the power of Almighty God expressed in both judgment and grace. There is a reason that Jesus' parables are so memorable. We simply can't shake them. We can't escape them. We can't forget them. In the book, the author says, I define the parables as surprising stories and word pictures drawn from the familiar that powerfully reveal to us the unfamiliar. When Christ tells us of the kingdom, he speaks as king. When he warns us of judgment that is to come, he speaks as the one who will judge the nations. When he tells us of grace, he speaks of the character and saving purpose of his own Father, and because he is grace. Now, in the previous 6 weeks, we've examined the following parables. First, the parable of the sower answered the fundamental question of why Jesus used parables to teach in the first place. The parable of the weeds showed how God sees the role of the church as it exists within a fallen world in today's time. Parable number 3 was the parable of the Good Samaritans, which spoke about the infinite love of God and the extraordinary expectations he has for his people. For number 4, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus instructed us as Christians to base our every thought, every word, every action on our conviction of the absolute sufficiency of God's Word. Week 5, we read 3 combined parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost sons, which set forth God's refusal to give up on the lost, heaven's joy over every lost sinner being found, and the universality of sin. And then the parable of the 2 sons in our last study revealed one's true answer to a call from God is revealed not by one's words, but by one's actions. Well, this week finds us once again settling into that parable-rich gospel of Luke. Here we have a parable sparse in content, having only 2 main characters mentioned directly and 1 mentioned very indirectly. Still, its inclusion in the sacred scriptures grants it the same value as any of the others we already have studied, or will study in due time. Let us read Luke's account of today's parable, the parable of the persistent widow. I turn to Luke 18, the first 8 verses, and this comes from the Expanded Bible version. Then Jesus used this parable to teach his followers that they should always pray and never lose hope or become discouraged. In a certain town, there was a judge who did not respectfully fear God or care what people thought. In that same town, there was a widow who kept coming to this judge saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." For a while, the judge refused to help her. But afterwards, he thought to himself, even though I don't respectfully fear God or care what people think, yet because she keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice. Otherwise, she'll just keep coming until she wears me out. The Lord said, listen to what the unrighteous judge said. God will always provide justice to his people who cry to him day and night, and he will not be slow to answer them or keep putting them off. I tell you, God will provide justice to his people quickly and suddenly. Yet when the Son of Man comes again, will he find faith on the earth? God's faithfulness is certain. The only question is whether people will remain faithful to him. You know, we've seen how it is that Jesus' parables often have the power to catch us by surprise. Such is the case with today's entry. The woman we find here is not described as the predictable sort of heroine we're used to encountering in stories. She's a widow who would be counted among the most powerless in the culture and society of her day, often overlooked by others around her. She's not singled out for having accomplished anything great or noteworthy. Why, she's not even formally named within Jesus' account of this story. And yet, this parable introduces us to one of the most interesting characters found anywhere in Scripture, referred to simply as a persistent widow. Make no mistake, her persistency is extraordinary, to the extent that Christ presents her as a model of Christian faithfulness. Because of her steadfastness, she is memorialized as one of Scripture's most steadfast individuals. Our second character is actually the first one that Luke mentions in setting up this parable, a man who serves the community as a judge. Once again, we find him described contrary to how we would expect such an individual to be done. He does not respectfully fear God, and he does not care what people think, both quotes from today's passage. We find in this language just about as severe an indictment of judicial malfeasance as we could imagine. He may be a judge, but he cares nothing for true justice at all, be it spiritual justice, personal justice, or cultural justice. He does not fear God, nor does he see his judicial responsibilities as being an extension of God's justice and mercy. He fears no one. He respects no one. A couple of attitudes which combine to create a recipe for disaster. Jesus brings the unknown widow together with the unnamed judge by stating that she demanded he, quote, give me justice against my adversary, end quote. Knowing what we do about this self-centered judge, it comes as no surprise when we are told that, quote, for a while the judge refused to help her, end quote. Excuse me, still getting over a respiratory infection. Here, however, is where the term persistent comes into play, for this woman does not give up. She surely must realize, excuse me again, surely she must realize her tenuous status in society means her only means of recourse lies in getting a favorable response from the local judge. It is implied by both Jesus and this spineless judge that the woman's plea for justice is a righteous one, and we can easily see that she expects its validity to be recognized in her favor. We learn from the judge's own words his acknowledgement of his own godless character, as well as his reason for ultimately going against his own conscience to accede to the widow's request. Returning back to the passage, it says, quote, the judge thought to himself, even though I don't respectfully fear God or care what people think, yet because she keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice. Otherwise, she will keep coming until she wears me out, end quote. In other words, it's another case of what's good for me will determine how I'll decide. Now, knowing what we do about this widow woman, it seems safe to say that yes, if the judge had not relented on this particular occasion, she would have simply continued in her persistence to demand grant her request over and over and over until he would finally have to do so. While we certainly understand this parable's point that the widow's constancy eventually wore down a crooked and unrighteous judge, we must not miss the more powerful and precious spiritual lesson Jesus would have us take away from the study. Note the tidy conclusion that Jesus uses to bring to the story to a tidy end. The Lord, quoting again from the passage, the Lord said, listen to what the unrighteous judge said. God will always provide justice to his people who cry to him day and night, and he will not be slow to answer them or keep putting them off. I tell you, God will provide justice to his people quickly or suddenly, end quote. What a wonderful, theologically rich principle to be drawn from this parable. The eventual relenting of the judge is contrasted strongly with the infinitely just God, who takes a much different, more compassionate approach to the requests that come his way. Our Heavenly Father longs to give us all good things, and he is always faithful to his word. When he makes a promise, he keeps it, always acting in a way that is completely consistent with his character and his power. There are some universal spiritual themes that we find presented within this particular parable. First, we need to recognize the power of the powerless within the kingdom of God. In our story, the judge is naturally seen as the one wielding power. He holds a position of power. It is to him that the people turn when they seek justice, and it is he who hands down decisions and settles disputes. And yet we see that he eventually yields to the greater power of this widow's persistence. God's word is extremely direct about the importance of our caring for vulnerable people. And it is to be understood that the expectation is that the New Testament church, as the body of Christ, pay particular attention to those most vulnerable. Jesus gives this heroic woman status in the kingdom and likewise displays her as a model to teach all disciples to pray without losing heart. A second theme we need to take from this reading is we need to ensure that our understanding of prayer is consistent with its biblical backed concept. Look back at the reason that Luke gives for Jesus presenting this certain parable at the very beginning of our Passions. Jesus uses this parable to teach his followers that they should always pray and never lose hope or become discouraged. End quote. Jesus, God incarnate, knows all that is within mankind, within our hearts and our minds. He knows our temptations to doubt. He knows our temptations to crumble under the weight of fatigue and frustration. He knows our temptations to lose heart. He chooses this lesson to address those struggles and to encourage us to take up the widow's character of persistence. At the same time, trusting God includes trusting him to answer our petitions according to his timetable and not necessarily ours. Just because we might not see God giving us all that we ask, we must nonetheless rest assured that he will always give us all we need. Our gracious and merciful Father knows us better than we know ourselves, and he takes care of us beyond our expectations and imaginations. There is a sneaky little passage that Jesus inserts at the conclusion of his parable, which on the surface may seem to be somewhat out of place. He says, quote, "Yet, when the Son of Man comes again, will he find faith on the earth?" God's faithfulness is certain. The only question is whether people will remain faithful to him, end quote. What are we to do with such a question? We do, after all, have this straight from the tongue of Jesus himself. Reading from Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, he tells us, "On this rock," Peter's confession, "I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not be able to defeat, overpower, conquer, or prevail against it," end quote. This, straight from Jesus' mouth himself, confirms that no human power will be able to extinguish the church and silence the gospel. No earthly power will be able to deny the Son of Man the faith on earth that he deserves to find upon his coming. And yet, Jesus did ask the question, a question that should shock any of us claiming to be his faithful followers. What might Jesus have meant by asking it? And what might we learn from it? In one sense, this question points to the necessity of the church being persistent in faith and faithfulness while earthly time continues. The Christian church is called to preach the gospel to all nations, to contend for the faith, to hold to the doctrine, to wait in expectation, to worship with boldness, and to make disciples until Jesus comes. While it is true that no earthly power can win the final victory over the Lord's church, persecution and martyrdom have been and might well continue to be, the lot of many Christians throughout centuries. When Jesus says that the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church, he gives us assurance. When Jesus asks if at the coming of man, coming of the Son of Man, he will find faith on the earth, he challenges each of us to maintain faithfulness. It is the responsibility of every generation of Christians to pass along the faith intact, in truth, in power, and in faithfulness. So that's our lesson from the persistent widow. I pray that this new series, where we're studying the parables of Jesus, is proving to be a blessing to your life. I know I'm certainly enjoying preparing them and presenting them and studying them along the way. Remember, all of these weekly video posts continue to be archived online, and you can always find them in a couple of locations. First, you can look at the Pilgrim, Tennessee Church of Christ page in Facebook, or secondly, you can look at the Pilgrim Church Media site on YouTube. I continue to encourage each of you who are viewing this to make a personal commitment that you will join me in doing both of the following things every day between now and our next video session. First, let us commit some time every day in the study of God's Word. When we do so, we are letting God's Word speak to us in whatever place our individual relationship with Him might be. And with God's Word speaking His will into our lives, we'll find ourselves better fitted to serve as the arms of Christ to those around us, whether they know Christ or not. Secondly, I ask you to commit to spending some time every day with God in prayer. This provides us the opportunity to acknowledge God's sovereignty, to thank Him for all the ways He blesses us every single day, to express repentance for and request forgiveness of our daily sins, and to intercede on behalf of those whom we know and love, and even those we don't even know, who might be in need of a special blessing from God within their individual lives. And who today does not need a special blessing from God in our individual lives? Well, if you're not already doing so, I do invite you to join us in Bible study, join us in worship, join us in our midweek fellowships at the Church of Christ in Pilgrim. If you should pay us a visit, I can assure you, you will receive a friendly greeting and a warm welcome by members of our church family. I hope you'll be able to join us in the coming weeks as we continue to walk through this series of devotional study videos about the parables of Jesus. And by joining us together, we can learn what the author has to tell us about one of Jesus's favorite methods of teaching, and for many of us, one of our favorite methods of learning, the parables that he taught. And we'll continue to examine some of them individually in the coming weeks. So, until our next study rolls around, please do remember, I love each one of you. I ask you to take care, and I wish you goodbye.